A Letter from Hell is a story of a woman who was damned and came back to tell a friend about it. It's a true story that carries the approval in 1953 of the Diocese of Treves in Germany. Now, eternity is no joke. How can we try to best comprehend eternity? We could use the following analogy I once heard to best describe how long it is. You can imagine an ant which takes a grain of sand from your state and travels all across the country and deposits that grain of sand in another state. Then the ant waits 100 years and repeats what it did before. Now, by the time all of the grain of sand from your state is in the other state, imagine eternity has not even begun. Hi, and welcome. Please do me a favor. If you have not hit the subscribe button yet, please subscribe. It helps tremendously with the channel. And with that being said, to speak of hell is a charity in a world which denies the existence of this reality. Hell not only exists, but is a dogma of our faith. Now, this letter recounts the tragic damnation of a young lady named Anne. This letter is written to a German lady who was a nun. She had a friend who died a certain death. One night she woke up and her friend had sent her a letter from beyond. The deceased in hell wrote a letter to her pious friend, mentioning all the times the Lord had tried to wake her up to the light of the faith. I had a friend, that is, we shared a mutual closeness as friends and neighbors, while the two of us worked in the same office. In mid-September of 1937, while I was vacationing in Lake Garda, my mother wrote to me. Imagine, Anne died. She lost her life in an automobile accident. She was buried yesterday in the cemetery of Woodstock. It is not clear if this was a vision or a vivid dream, but this is a very distinct meditation on hell and helps us all to think of hell while we're still living, so that we do not fall into it when we die. The living friend, the nun, is called Claire. The damned lady is called Anne. She says, "Claire, do not pray for me. I am damned." As I tell you this and relate to you certain circumstances and details about my condemnation, do not think I do this out of our friendship. Here we no longer love anymore. In truth, I would like to see you here where I will remain forever. Do not be surprised at my intent. Here, we all think the same way. Our will is petrified in evil, even when I do something good, as I do now, in opening your eyes about the reality of hell. We do not do it with good intention. And all of these memories serve to show us the horrible aspect of the graces we rejected from the Lord, how this torments us. We do not eat, we do not sleep, nor do we walk with our legs. Being spiritually enchained, we reprobates gaze in terror at our misspent lives, howling and gnashing our teeth, tormented and filled with hatred. Here we drink hatred as if it were water. We all hate one another. Do you now understand why hell must be eternal? It is because our obstinacy never diminishes and never ends. Then the letter from here recounts 7 or 8 instances where the damned lady precisely recounts the amount of times her friend tried to bring her back to the faith and the moments of grace she received and rejected. The first one, she says, "One day you admonished me, and you would be lost if you do not pray more." In truth, she says, I prayed very little, and always with reluctance and much annoyance. You were undoubtedly right. All those who burn in hell either did not pray or did not pray enough. Prayer is the first step towards God. It is always decisive, especially prayer to her who is the Mother of God, whose name we are not permitted to say here. Devotion to her draws innumerable souls away from the devil, souls whose sins would otherwise have cast them into his hand. Praying on earth is the simplest thing to do, and justly so, for God linked salvation to this simplest of actions. For years, I had lived apart from God. Consequently, when I received that final call of grace, I decided against the Lord. You repeatedly admonished me to hear sermons and to read pious books, but I regularly excused myself, citing a lack of time. How many times do people make this excuse, especially within our families? At times too, God beckoned me to a church when, despite work at the office during the day, I took care of my sick mother. I strongly felt the attractions of God. Once at the hospital chapel, where you used to take me during our free time at midday, I found myself but one step away from conversion. And I cried. The pleasures of this world flowed over this grace like a torrent. Like the parable in the scriptures, the thorns choked out the wheat, rationalizing that religion is sentimentalism, according to the manner it was discussed in the office. I cast this grace, like so many others, to the ground. Once you reprimanded me, because in church, rather than genuflecting, I made a hasty nod of my head. You thought it was laziness, not suspecting I no longer believed in the presence of Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. I now believe it, she says from hell. You reprimanded me for not having attended Mass with you. I then told you of my Sunday amusements. Your first question was, did you go to Mass? In the depth of my soul, I lived in revolt against the Lord. You did not perceive that. You always thought I was still a good Catholic. I went to confession and Holy Communion one more time before my wedding, but it was a mere formality. Now this lady got married, and she says her marriage was harmonious for a short time. She shared the same opinion with her husband about most things, which included not having children, because she didn't want the burden. Deep down, my husband wanted one. Ultimately, I was able to banish that idea. I preferred fine clothing and furniture, tea with the ladies, rides in our car, and like amusements. There passed a year of earthly pleasure, from our wedding day until my sudden death. All souls do not suffer here equally. The more frivolous and malicious and determined someone was in sin, the more the loss of God weighs upon him, the more torture he feels due to the creation he has abused. Catholics who are damned suffer more than those of other beliefs, because in general, they received more lights and graces without taking advantage of them. He who knows more suffers more than those who had lesser knowledge. He who sinned out of malice suffers more than those who fell from weakness. No one suffers more than he deserves. And the final admonishment happens on the day of her death. Before my sudden end, I did not know hell as it truly is. On that very morning of my death, the idea that I could, after all, go to Mass came to me unexpectedly. Remember, Christ wants to save everybody, and he was trying to inspire her to go to the Mass. It sounded to me like a supplication, clear and determined. My no nipped the thought in the bud. And now, I must finish this once and for all. And I assumed all the consequences. And now, I endure them in hell. We have only a confused knowledge of what transpires in the world, but we know what closely concerns us. At the moment of my death, I awoke from darkness. I found myself suddenly enveloped by a blinding light. It was at the same place where my body lay. It seemed like a theater where the lights suddenly go out. The curtain noisily opened, and a tragically illuminated scene appeared, the scene of my life. I saw my soul as if in a mirror. I saw the graces I had trampled underfoot. From the time I was young, until the final no to the Lord. I felt like an assassin, brought to trial with my inanimate victim before me. Repent? Never. Was I ashamed of myself? Not at all. Notwithstanding, it was impossible for me to remain in the presence of the God I had denied and rejected. Only one thing remained for me: the fire. Just as Cain fled the body of Abel, so did my soul flee from this overwhelming sight. That was my private judgment. The invisible judge spoke, Depart from me. And my soul fell swiftly, like a sulphurous shadow, into the place of eternal torment. The intention of this video is not to scare you, although it is scary. Rather, its intention is to make us realize that hell does exist. And the best way to avoid hell is to realize that it is there and does exist. This tells us of the truths of hell. The troubled consciences, knowing that they have rejected all the graces to come. Do not be afraid, however. It is important to know the reality of hell so that we can avoid this abyss of suffering. If you are a child of Mary, closer you will be to God, and the knowledge of the damned will not trouble you, but will encourage you to pray along with sacrifice, so that sinners do not fall into this chasm of iniquity. The Lord desires your salvation. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And if you like these types of videos, click on the video above, and I'll catch you on the other side.